Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I bring HB 360 before you today. In the summer of 2026, the World Cup is coming to Atlanta. HB 360 is an important piece of legislation to make sure our capital city is prepared to meet the needs of thousands of soccer fans from across the world. This bill is designed to jumpstart development in downtown Atlanta, particularly in areas that surround the stadium where the games will be held. Many of you are familiar with the Georgia's historical tax rehabilitation credit, which has long supported revitalization of historic structures by encouraging private investments in historical buildings. HB 360 encourages developers to complete their historical projects in downtown Atlanta prior to the start of the World Cup, allowing them to claim those accelerated tax credits if they're able to get their certificate of occupancy prior to the end of 2026. Importantly, this bill does not increase the current yearly cap of historical tax credits. It simply allows developers that have been approved to receive those tax credits in future years. There is a sunset on this tax credit in 2029, so it would be 2027, 2028, or 2029. To claim those credits early if they complete those projects before the World Cup. There was an interpretation question that was cleared up and had been addressed by DOR. This bill would allow funds to be pulled forward from the yearly $30 million cap. It would not create any additional funds. These have already been approved in future years. It would just pull those back to 2026. The total, if all of the projects in this selected area in Atlanta were completed and had a CO, the total cost of that would be $29 million. With that, Mr. President, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do have a couple questions, Senator. Recognize Senator from the second.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I do.
Senator, I'm trying to understand this piece of legislation in relation to the tax credits and pulling them forward for certified structures for tax year 2027, 2028, and 2029. So you're saying out of the state allocation of those tax credits that this individual developer will be able to pull forward the preceding years after forward in the current tax year. Is that not true?
That is true.
And so will the credits being pulled forward lessen the amount of available credits that already exist in the total dollar amount?
That is correct. Yeah, we're not adding any additional dollars. It just pulls those forward, so you would, that $29 million, if they get COs on all those projects. Being in the construction world and timing of construction projects, some do run long, but if they all were completed in this designated area around the stadium, the additional funds would be $29 million that would be pulled forward. So then in future years, and it's my understanding those credits actually go out to 28 that have been applied for in that particular area. It's 27 and 28, so it's 2 years that would be pulled forward. So no additional money. It's just those future years would be less.
So the future years would be less, and it also says not just, you said up to 28, but Senator, the legislation on line 16 also says that it would include year 2029 as well. So we'd be lessening the amount of credits available to everybody in the rest of the state for one project.
No, sir. And I'm glad you asked that question, Senator. No, sir. What it would do is these projects have already been approved. So there would be no taking away from other folks. These projects are already on the books. They've been approved. It's just they're approved essentially around the stadium, basically, and it does go out to 2029. There's about $1 million worth of credits that have been applied for and given in 29. But these projects don't go out that far. The projects around the stadium, they've been approved for 27 and 28. So those 2 years would be pulled back. But there would be no taking or no less credits out there for folks to claim. They've already been approved for those credits. It's just accelerating them, so those projects would be done by the World Cup. So we've got a nice, vibrant area around the stadium.
Last question, Senator. Have we done this for any other part of the state?
I don't know the answer to that.
Recognize the pro tem for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I do.
Senator, do I understand that if HB 360 passes, that those that have applied for and been approved for these tax credits for 26 going forward, they're all in a line and they have a position in the line for each year, the total of which maximizes out at the $30 million cap per year, right?
That is correct.
And that if this bill passes, no one loses their spot in line, nor are they pushed back or forward.
That is correct.
And that the amount of money that they have been approved for the tax credit will not change, will not increase certainly, but will not decrease if 360 is passed.
That is also true.
So the passage of HB 360 has no effect or impact on the others that have asked for and been allocated this tax credit out into the future as far as 2030.
That is correct.
Thank you, Senator.
Yes, and one other point of clarity, in some of my discussions, folks have asked, oh, was this jumping in line? And it's not jumping in line. The folks that are in, 27, 28, 29, if you can imagine, of course, Gwinnett's home for me, so I'm imagine being on 85. You've got a Peach Pass lane, you got the other lanes on 85, and they're all traveling in the non-Peach Pass lane, but their schedules will not change. Essentially, we're allowing for these projects around where the World Cup will happen would be able to get in the Peach Pass lane to be accelerated so that the area around the stadium is very vibrant for these games.
Well, you got later. You all of a sudden got a bunch of folks popped up on here, Senator. Recognize the Senator from the 53rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. With Senator Yield,
I will.
what's the number of developers that seek to benefit from this legislation?
And I don't know if this is 100% true, but in the discussions I've had, I believe there's only one developer
So,
that I'm aware of. There may be more. That's just what I've been made aware of.
so this legislation is going to benefit one developer in the entire state. Is that correct?
What I would argue is that this will actually benefit the city of Atlanta. It'll benefit Georgians. It'll benefit how this area around the stadium looks when we have the World Cup come and Atlanta and Georgia is showcased to the soccer world.
Senator, will you further yield?
Sure.
How do you say it's going to help all Georgians? Don't you think it's going to burden Georgians by having to pay more taxes because this one person is being exempt from taxes?
What I would say is, I mean, you can argue tax credits, but these tax credits have already been approved. Like this is not a new. They're not applying. This is not a new developer coming in applying for the credits now. They've already been approved for these projects. It's just where they've been approved around the stadium. The credits have been approved in 27 and 28. This would just pull those back to 26, so we can get those projects done before the World Cup comes to Atlanta.
I'll be voting no, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recognize the Senator from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President. Does the Chairman yield?
I do.
We keep talking about the World Cup, but the certificate of occupancy does not need to be issued until December 31st of 2026. So I think it's about 6 months after. So what I'd like to know is, and I can draft this quickly, would you be amenable to an amendment that would change December 31st on line 19 to June 1st so that we actually ensure this is complete for the World Cup?
I would be amenable to that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, you have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield well.